Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. We're in the chapter of non-Western critical thinking. We're in session number 2. When we're talking about critical thinking, there's been a little bit of discussion on what's called epistemological beliefs, and that people have the idea that certain groups of people can or can't do a certain type of critical thinking, a certain style of critical thinking, because of their epistemological beliefs. So what we have up here is the house diagram again. And when we talk about epistemological beliefs, what we're talking about is knowledge, beliefs about knowledge. So there's 2 areas here on the house that deal with epistemology. One is, number 1, our source of reliable knowledge. That is an epistemological belief. Where do we get reliable knowledge from? There's 4 sources. There's the intuition, there's the external authority, there's human reason, and there's empiricism, observation. So we have a choice. So epistemological belief is, what is your choice? What do you believe is the best source for reliable knowledge? So this one here, number 1, our source of reliable knowledge, that's a belief. What would you choose and what do you choose? We're on non-Western cultures and what they would choose. And it is different from Western cultures. The other epistemological belief is in the methods. So it's number 10. So it's tied to the source. So your methods, or excuse me, it's not 10, it's 7, 8, 9. The methods vary according to what your source is, or what you claim to be your source of reliable knowledge. So what they are saying is that do different epistemological beliefs from source and methods influence if one can or cannot do critical thinking. But I would reframe it saying, okay, maybe would it influence the style of critical thinking from being an engager to a seeker type, depending on epistemological beliefs. What we're going to look at now is the Chinese culture, because I believe the Chinese culture would represent a non-Western culture, and how would they deal with critical thinking, and how can critical thinking be applied to within their cultural values and within their dispositions. What are some of their beliefs, epistemological beliefs? Well, the Chinese culture, critical thinking style, in their epistemological beliefs, one, they believe in external authority. Okay, so that right then puts them in a different ballpark, because they have not, for the majority or for history, chosen reason as the number 1 source of reliable knowledge, but for the most part, they believe in external authority. Number 2, they have a very high respect for their elders and for older people within their society and within their culture. So in other words, they would not question the authority or the knowledge that comes from the older or elders in their community. They conserve traditions. Okay, well, there we go. There again is because Socrates or the early philosophers, and Brian McGee, he says, no more revelation, no more religion, no more external authority, and no more traditions. So these are kind of going against what the early Greek philosophers proposed as their guiding light, their guiding system. So the Chinese conserve traditions. They are community-centered. So in other words, they are not individually minded. They're community centered, which is now another big difference because it's not self-reliant. It's not self-thinker. It's not so it's other, it's community centered. They are truth seekers. They are holistic in thought. So they're not, that would mean not tend to be analytical, because analytical is focusing on something abstract. Abstract and analytical kind of go together because analytical is take apart, analyze, take things apart. Abstract is to take out of its context and just study it alone by itself without a context. And so the Chinese tend to be holistic in thought, which meaning you have to have a context. You leave everything together and they look at the whole system. They would be system thinkers. So in other words, how does the Chinese critical thinking style, what would that be considering their epistemological beliefs? External authority, respect for their elders, conserve traditions, community-centered, truth seekers, holistic in thought. That does not go in line with a Socratic method of critical thinking, because these dispositions would be more in line with the seeker style, but not with the engager style. Chinese critical thinking style, their epistemological beliefs. The government and universities realize the importance of educating citizens to think creatively, critically, innovatively, to meet global needs and challenges. Okay, so China being a world leader today in economy, economics, by the products that they produce, is bringing a shift to the culture. And they realize that to remain competitive, they have to be on the cutting edge. They have to be on the front edge of thinking. And so critically thinking. So they're saying, okay, we are now realizing the importance of educating citizens to think creatively, critically, innovatively, to meet global needs and challenges. So how does what they want to do fit into their box or their parameters established by their culture, their non-Western thinking culture? Well, to keep up or to meet these demands, a lot of Chinese students have gone abroad with I don't know if it's actually with the help of the government, government sponsored, but a lot of them are family sponsored from all different levels of income. And they are sending out, they say there's over 700,000 Chinese students studying abroad at places that include the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, and many other countries as well. So China is looking at, okay, to keep up, who do we have to keep up with? Let's send our students to study there, who are the ones that we want to compete with. So send our students there to study, and then when they come back, they can equip us to be just as competitive. But what happens if you send a student from a non-Western culture to a Western culture to study to become competitive? Well, what you study and how you study is reinforcing the culture of where you're studying. So if you're studying outside of your culture, you're going to learn things that are going to generate dispositions of another culture or another thinking habit. So not sure how this is going to play out for the non-Western countries that want to be competitive, but at the same time, it could erode the non-Western culture where they came from. What style of critical thinking are they targeting, and how much are they willing to sacrifice? Okay, that would be the question. Okay, what style of critical thinking are they targeting, or do they even know that there's different styles? Or do they think that maybe the Socratic method is the only method available or style that is permissible or available to study? So what style of critical thinking are they targeting? And how much are they willing to sacrifice? How much of their values? How much of their culture? Because if they have a high respect for authority, a high respect for elders, a high respect for community, being in community, then what about the dispositions of the Socratic method? That will erode those values in the student that is learning critical thinking via the Socratic method. If they pursue the Socratic method style of critical thinking, these are the new dispositions that will be generated. Okay, we've gone over these dispositions earlier. What are they? Do they reflect the values of the Chinese culture? 1, rational thinking. Well, you're thinking, sure, it could be. We all should think rationally. Well, what that means is rational thinking is the primary source of reliable knowledge, replacing authority. And so now it's kind of like, okay, is that what you want to do? You want to replace then your source of reliable knowledge as being external authority, the government, and substitute it with something that makes it personal, inward? My open-mindedness are those countries open-minded to any idea? Now, maybe they might be economically, but politically, I don't think so. But I don't know if you can divide and separate, saying, no, we're open-minded just in this sector and not in this sector. I don't believe that would work. Open-minded, analytical, self-confident, inquisitiveness, questioning the status quo, questioning of authority, suspicious of knowledge claims. If any student took these back to their home country in China, I don't know what would happen, but there's been different rebellions in different times of the of history, and they've all been put down pretty forcefully. And so it's kind of like these are qualities that got Socrates in trouble in his time. He was accused of inciting rebellion. He was accused of corrupting the youth. And Socrates did commit suicide. He was he was given options to flee or to stay and drink the poison. So he stayed and drank the poison and died for being a rebel. Died because of not going along with the conservative nature of the culture. So in other words, what are these dispositions? These are Socrates' dispositions. So the Socratic method, if that's the method that they are promoting or wanting their students to learn, that method will undermine the authority of the state. So how far and what do you want to sacrifice? Well, it says here, at universities throughout mainland China, ideological, political courses, a typical term for teaching communist theory, Marxism, Mao's thought, and I can't even say the other one, Deng's theory, are required to safeguard university students' political loyalty to the Communist Party. These courses are compulsory from primary school to university. Okay, is the Chinese government willing to allow critical thinking into their culture by sending 700,000 students to study abroad to come back and do what? Critical think, be competitive and innovative in one area, one sector, and not think about or apply the same dispositions to the political realm. It appears that China is not willing to sacrifice or lose any authority in the political realm. So I don't know if they understand the consequences of learning the Socratic method, the engager style of critical thinking, and that they need to be careful if they want to support their ideology, then they need to support it through education and through the dispositions that education promotes. So, in other words, what about critical thinking? Okay, you can do critical thinking if you follow the Florida inventory style, which proposes that are two ways to critical think, which is through the Socratic method, which is engagers, or non-Socratic, which is through seekers. But if schools only teach the Socratic method, then China better be careful about where they're sending their students and what they're going to get out of it. The Chinese critical thinking style. Results indicate that U.S. students tended to prefer an engaging critical thinking style. Now, this is from a survey of someone that applied these different tests to the university, and this was to U.S. students. U.S. students tended to prefer an engaging critical thinking style, whereas Chinese students tended to prefer an information-seeking critical thinking style. These differences between critical thinking style preferences may be explained by students' cultural backgrounds. This is from a study that was done at a university, and saying that the Chinese students there preferred a seeker style, but the U.S. students, almost by majority, preferred the engager style. And so what they're saying is these differences between critical thinking style preferences may be explained by students' cultural backgrounds. I would say it has a lot to do with it. And culture needs to be taken and accounted for, which is a fairly new idea in the Western culture, in that, not everybody thinks alike, so education cannot be universal. Education has to tailor itself to the culture that it is promoting, or the culture from which the students are coming from and want to return to. A student needs to be taught within the dispositions of that culture. So the Chinese had a tendency towards the seeker style. Again, the seeker style, people who score on the seeking information side of the scale are aware of their own predispositions and biases and recognize their current opinions and positions have been influenced by his or her environment and experiences. Okay? So a Chinese student recognizes there's different biases. A Chinese student recognizes that they have biases, and that when they are going to study abroad, they're hit with those biases of this other culture. They know, because how many of us, of U.S. students, go abroad to study, and even if it's still in a Western culture, you're still confronted with the biases and the cultural differences, even though it's still maybe Western. But you try to go to a non-Western culture, and the differences are even greater, and you quickly see that you have biases and they have biases because there are differences between us. So these seeker styles are coming to another culture, and they understand there's cultural differences, and so there are biases and preferences. And so what is the truth? So they are seeking truth because there's differences between us. It says they are hungry learners, open to the opinion of others, and take care to seek out divergent points of view. These type of students are paying a lot of money as out-of-country students to study at a university, and many of their parents are not rich. So they are making huge sacrifices. So this student is going to be applied. This student knows that the future of their clan, their group, depends upon them. So they are hungry learners, open to the opinions of others, and take care to seek out. They want to know what's going on. They want to get to the truth that's going to elevate their country within the competitive market. Seekers have a desire to know the truth, even if the truth conflicts with presently held beliefs and opinions. Now, how far can they change or challenge the beliefs and opinions of their home country? There are lines drawn, but if they apply a seeker style, then they can work out those lines. They can work out the knowledge, the reliable knowledge. But if it's a Socratic method just kind of does not take into account cultural differences or cultural sources. Socratic method just kind of questions everything and gets down to almost deconstructing knowledge completely. In response to the question, why should we teach critical thinking? Proponents of critical thinking have given the following three answers. Okay. It has been asked, why should we teach critical thinking? And it's been asked in the Western culture environment. And the responses are, proponents of critical thinking have given the following three answers. A, it enhances individual autonomy. Okay? Is that a good answer for somebody coming from China or from any non-Western country? Critical thinking enhances individual autonomy. Okay, B, it fosters well-functioning democracies. How about that one? Does that correspond to the home country's desire of non-Western country when it's teaching its ideologies of communism and Marxism from primer grades, grammar school, all the way up through university? It's more than a quarter of total of their study units is ideology and critical thinking. The purpose, why teach critical thinking? Because it fosters well-functioning democracies. Democracies is built on individualism. It's built upon one expressing their personal rights. Whereas in a non-Western country, there aren't personal rights. They're personal duties that the person fulfills to be a part of that community. And C, it improves one's linguistic skills and hence one's ability to persuade. So why, in response to the question, why should we teach critical thinking? What do you think of these answers? What do they do to the home culture that is non-Western, but yet trying to be competitive economically? And so they're sending their students out to learn abroad. Over 700,000 of their students are studying abroad, but yet these are the goals of critical thinking. It enhances individual autonomy. It it fosters well-functioning democracies, and it improves one's linguistic skills for debate. So, where do we go from here? Well, the Chinese critical thinking style then is the seeker style, and that will serve the culture. The engager style will transform it. So in other words, if you're looking at to serve the culture, then it's a seeker. A seeker from within the culture is seeking how to get knowledge that fits back within the culture and the cultural norms. Whereas the engager seeks to transform the culture. And that's what Socrates did. He transformed his culture. His culture was non-Western. It was authority-driven. It was don't ask. It was tradition. It was the gods' authority. It was a lot of things. And Socrates came in and transformed that culture. And that's why he paid the price for it at the beginning, because the others in that culture recognized what he was doing and said, you are ruining, you are a threat to this culture and as to its continuity and what it stands for, you are wanting to change everything. And so, yes, critical thinking will transform the culture if the critical thinking is an engager style. That wraps up session number 2 on critical thinking. Chapter 11, non-Western critical thinking. I hope this gives a little bit of an idea of what's happening and what can happen, and we're going to continue with the next session on a different culture and how that culture might respond to critical thinking. Thanks for accompanying me. This is wrapping on session number 2, chapter 11, non-Western critical thinking. Thank you very much.